Hello, class. I thought I'd jump into assignment 5 in case anybody was struggling. The assignment this week you had, for assignment 5, you had the CPP file that you were given, and you had to create all the classes to make this CPP file work without making any changes to it. So the one I thought I might help with is the order class. Now the order class might be a little more tricky than the others, just dealing with, because in my UML that I drew up, you can see that the order class contains a customer, which contains an address, and it also contains a product. So the order kind of has is connected to everything. So I was going to help you maybe get started with the order class. Okay, so we're going to go to order.h. You should always start with the .h file. And it's set up for you with some includes and the definition check. So we're going to start with defining the class. Has to be the exact name with the capitalization. Don't forget your semicolon at the end. There we go. So we're going to have two sections. We're going to have a private section and a public section. Okay. In my UML, you can see that the private section is the top with the negative signs, and the public section is the bottom section. So we got the private with the negatives and the public with the positive. It's important to do your UML charts and be able to plan things out. There's a lot of problems you can solve on paper before you start getting into the code that you can kind of see with more of a bird's eye view and making sure everything's connected properly. I encourage you to start practicing drawing UML charts for your classes while it's easy right now. Okay, so in the private section, I've got 3 variables that I need to make. I need a quantity. That's just going to be an integer variable. But now I also have 2 other variables that are going to be using the other classes. So I've included product, so now I can create a product of type product, and also I'll make a customer, and I'll just name it customer, keep things simple. Okay, so the order consists of a quantity, the number they bought, the actual product, which is defined in the other class, and the customer's information, which is defined in the other class. All right, now in the public, this is where we're going to define all the member functions. Okay, so we're going to have 2 things going on here. We're going to do all the getter and setter and displaying functions, and we're also going to be doing the constructors. So we're learning more about constructors. So the default constructor is the one that gets called with no parameters. So I'm going to define that first. Now, if you've been reading, you'll notice that the constructors don't have a data type, a return type defined. You just start with the name of the class, and that is going to be your constructor. So in here, the default, the only thing I really have to do by default is set a quantity, and I'll just set my quantity to 0. When an order is created, because it has a product and a customer, those will get set by their own constructors, their own default constructors. So I only have to set the quantity. Okay. Now I can have as many constructors as I need to satisfy the different parameter requirements. So I'm also going to make a custom constructor that receives a product a quantity, and a customer. So you can call it with 3 already made values. And if you pass it with 3 variables, this with 3 parameters and 3 arguments to those parameters, it'll call this constructor to create the object. So this one will just be, hey, we are going to have a set product function, and we give it a product. We'll be defining that in a second. We have a set quantity. We give it the quantity that they sent. You have to spell everything correctly. And we have the set customer. And give it that customer. Okay, so constructors generally aren't too complex. You just take the values you're given and you set all your private variables equal to those things. Okay. So now let's do the getters. So getter functions are just functions that are intended to go and return the member variables that are private. Okay. So the first one we have is get product. It's constant because we don't want it to change anything. And we can do this function in line. It's very simple. We just return the product. Okay, the other two are going to be just as simple. Get quantity, also constant. And the same thing for customer. Now, by convention, you'll notice that getter functions usually start with the word get. That helps us recognize getter functions. They're just simple functions that allow whoever's using your program to access your member variables. You keep them private. If there's anything in a getter or a setter that needs to be done special so that the values don't get changed or that they do the right thing, you have control of that. They don't get to access your private member variables directly. Okay, so 3 getters, and how about 3 setters? So the setters will have void. They don't want to return anything. You send data to them and they update the member variables. And these all start with the word set. Okay. Now this is fun to talk about. I'm gonna do the setter inline, and I'm gonna use the keyword this and point to the product. So this is kind of a weird variable or thing to talk about because this is kind of the object's way of referring to itself. So you're just saying, okay, get in the head of the product, okay, get my product. So this product would refer to whatever object is currently active, and it's going to go look in itself for its member variable. And we can set that equal to the product. Now, using the keyword this isn't always necessary, but in this case, since the name of the parameter has the same variable name as the member variable, then to be able to distinguish, we have to specify with the this pointer. Okay, and we're going to have 2 more of those using the same pattern. Set quantity. Customer. I'm sure it's exciting to watch me type. and I can't spell customer. Customer, there we go. Okay, so 3 getters, 3 setters. They follow the same pattern. Oh, forgot some semicolons here. Okay, now I'm also going to I also have a few more functions that I need to do. Those are the easy ones. These ones might be a little more tricky. I'm going to make a function that returns a string to get the shipping zip. Now the shipping zip is a little bit deeper because that has to do with the address. And so if we look in the UML, to get to the address, we have to look in the customer, and we have to look in the customer's address to get to address. Okay, so that's going to be a little bit tricky. So we're not going to do that one in line. We're going to have a function called total price. And a couple display functions. All constant. Information, there we go. Okay, so these are all the things I would do inside my header file. So in here, the getters and the setters, they've all been defined inline. Okay, because they're simple enough, they're just returning or getting setting a value. But these 4, we're going to have to define inside order.cpp. Okay, so we'll start with that get shipping zip. Okay, we're going to have to add a few things here to the CPP file. We got to do some standard stuff. We got to include the IO stream. We need to include the string. We're going to be using string for returning from the get shipping zip. In the CPP, it's perfectly acceptable for using namespace, the standard namespace. And in addition to including the order.h, we're going to probably need access to a lot of the other classes, so I'm just going to include them all. All right, now we're ready to start putting our methods in. All right, so the get shipping zip, that needed to return a string. I'm using the namespace, so I don't need to say std : All right, so string, the return type, or let's see, the class is order. We have the scope operator, and then we say get shipping zip. It was constant. All right, so this one, what I'm going to do is, the trick here is we want to define a temporary address class object. So a temporary address, and we'll set that equal to the customer, the member variable called customer. By getting a hold of the customer, we're going to be able to have access. By getting to the customer, we're going to have access to address. Okay, and then all I have to do is take that temporary address okay, we'll stop